morning, a devotion today entitled, one of the most invaluable lessons I've learned over the years as a leader is the power of one language. As a leader, one of your most arduous tasks is to get everyone on the team to speak one language. To speak one language means that everyone is on the same page and has the same focus. For everyone to speak with one language, it requires selflessness and compromise. Everyone speaking one language on the team will enable the team to do the impossible and the unimaginable. I recall a biblical story about the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11 that speaks to the power of one language. And it reads, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And they said, Let us go to a city and a tower whose top may reach unto the heaven. Let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see that tower which the children of men built." And in verse 6, the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they all have one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do." The moral of this story is, when everyone comes together for one purpose and speaks the same language, there is nothing that cannot be accomplished. In conclusion, I want to encourage our nation to come together and speak one language. While we might all be different, share divergent views, we should never allow our differences to cause us to be divided amongst ourselves. As a nation, despite our size, we can do more. We can go further. We can experience greater if we all speak one language. I leave you with this final thought today. Instead of fighting each other, let us fight to unite, because a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Selah. Think and act on these things. Let us pray. Our gracious and eternal Father, we praise and exalt you for your excellent goodness toward us. We thank you for the multiple blessings upon our lives. We thank you for health. We thank you for strength. We thank you for sparing our lives to see yet another day. We pray today for our nation. We ask that you would make us one. O Lord, remove strife, confusion, envy, and pride, selfishness, and malice, and bigotry, and all the things that divide us. O Lord, help us to speak one language so that we can accomplish great things and be a force to reckon with on the world stage. Now, Father, we pray for our political leaders. We ask that you would fill their hearts and minds with your thoughts, your ideas, your plans, and your wisdom as they seek to conduct the people's business. O Lord, bless the proceedings of this house today. Let your perfect will be done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Let us repeat the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Honorable members, good morning. At the suspension, we were at laying of documents by ministers, but before we begin, I would like for us to turn our attention to the gallery. Seated in our public gallery this morning is one of our distinguished former chaplains of this honorable house in the person of Reverend Philip Ramming. Reverend Ramming served as chaplain of the House of Assembly upon the Bahamas attaining majority rule during the speakership of the late Sir Alvin Brennan. He has always expressed gratitude for the privilege extended for him to serve in this capacity. Reverend Ramming retired from the position by way of a letter dated 21st September 1969. I ordered to pursue further studies at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. But being the house chaplain is not his only claim to fame. Reverend Ramming has left his indelible marks on Bahamian history. He wrote the Bahamas Pledge, and he also wrote the national song, God Bless Our Sunny Clime. Reverend Ramming is here today in celebration of his 92nd birthday, which falls on Tuesday, the 28th day of this month, January 2025. Accompanying Reverend Ramming is his sister, who is entering her 91st year and will be 91 on 1st of September this year. He is also accompanied by other family members and well-wishers. I am sure honorable members would want me to wish Reverend Ramming a very sincere happy birthday to you, sir. We hope you live to see many more. Welcome once again to these hallowed halls. Your presence here today is a blessing to us all. Happy birthday, Reverend Ramming, from me to you, sir. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
If I may, with your leave, Madam Speaker, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to pass up this occasion to add words of welcome to the House to Reverend Dr. Ramming, who's actually the Right Honorable Reverend Dr. Philip Ramming, having been honored with the Order of the Bahamas at the highest level, at the companion level, for the work he's done in the national song, as you said, and also the pledge, which all of the little children and ourselves recite after the singing of the national anthem. He's an eminence grise in Fox Hill, the oldest of the pastors, part of the George Mackey generation, former president of the Christian Council, and we revere him in the community of Fox Hill. He is the senior pastor emeritus of Rehoboth Ministries, a church which he built from scratch at the advanced age that he is. And so for all those reasons, we revere and thank him for his service. And it is a real honor and privilege to see him with his family members here today in the House, in a place where he made his mark so many, many decades ago. I want to thank him for his service and congratulate him on attaining the age of 92. May I reach that age one day. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much. Speaker, I'd like to join with colleagues in paying tribute to Dr. Ramming. All of us on this side who went to the University of the Bahamas while it was the College of the Bahamas, we benefited from his guidance and his leadership. And we observed the respect the university had for him then, as they do now, and we're very much grateful. And of course, I was a resident of Fox Hill for 12 and a half years, and know of the reputation that he's established for decades in that community. I had the great honor of being present at the service where he made his last set of appointments at the church that he has come to be associated with for so many years, and to watch a transition in leadership, but also to hear additional tributes to the legacy that he's established in this country. And we are grateful to him, all of us. He has the distinction of all of us at some point have put our hands on on our left breast and pay tribute to a country echoing words that God has delivered to us through him. And so, sir, we are grateful for your stellar leadership, for the example that you've set over the years, and may God continue to bless you and your family.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Yamacraw.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as a registered voter of Yamacraw, it would be remiss of me not to use this opportunity to extend sincere happy birthday to Dr. Raming on his 92nd birthday on behalf of the Yamacraw constituency. So we wish you much health, strength, and God's blessings on the journey wherever it continues to carry you. And happy birthday again on behalf of Yamacraw. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honourable members. We will now revert to the order of business. Statement communication by ministers? No further statement communication by ministers. Communications by the clerk? Messages from the Governor General? Messages from the Senate? None. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat and new writs, presentations of petitions, presentations of reports of committees, adoption of reports of committees, first reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, I rise to move the withdrawal of a previous bill read for the first time, being the Transaction in Movable Property Security Interest Bill 2024, and I would wish to replace it, Madam Speaker, with this bill, which is a bill for an act to modernize the law governing transaction in movable property security interest. I understand the side opposite has already been provided a copy of the same.
Thank you, honourable member. Is there a seconder? Thank you, honourable member. Other document be brought up? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time. A bill for an act to modernize the law governing transactions in movable property security interests. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time.
A bill for an act to modernize the law governing transaction in movable property security interests.
For the first readings?
No further first readings.
Thank you, honourable member. Second reading committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Foxhill.
So good morning again, Madam Speaker. And I rise to move the following two bills, of course, seriatim, but we'll move the first of which is a bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Chapter 24, and for connected matters. And that's bill number 89. And then when we come to the actual moving to committee stage, bill number 90, an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Alray Institute of Foreign Affairs and related purposes. And I want to start off by saying that I read those because I'm hoping that this is a tightly scripted debate about what this bill is about. And particularly in this atmosphere, avoiding any of the traps with regard to what may have happened or may not have happened in another country. This is about trying to make the administration of the Foreign Service more efficient and up-to-date and modern and in alignment with the practices around the world, and also to align it with the way I understand the Constitution to have established foreign affairs both in Articles 111 and 112 and also the various laws that have been passed since then. It's been a rather long journey, and if I may be permitted some sentiment at this stage, it's a phrase which comes from Sidney Poitier, who, when he accepted the Academy Award, made just that statement. And I say this because statecraft is a long journey. I looked at myself in the mirror as we were going over this yesterday, and my hair is now entirely gray. When I go to St. Paul's, there's a lady who always walks up to me and says my face is getting too fat. So it's just been a long time. But in that long time, all of you who are younger politicians know that you have to struggle to get what it is you want to accomplish, and that you're here for the long term. So when I came here when I came to Parliament first in 1992, it was at the end of a long journey of activism, and I had started out as a columnist in the PLP's newspaper, which was called The World Stage. And The World Stage was a weekly column about foreign affairs. So that's been my vocation or calling, discussing foreign affairs from the time I was a university student and in my early career as a journalist. So that was the lesson that if you have an interest, that you can carve out your future by becoming an expert before you get there. You become a spokesman on topics that are of interest to you, and ultimately you become the object of the Prime Minister who says you're it because you know about the particular subject. So it's been a long journey. I want to also say how the pastor this morning was talking about the Tower of Babel. And it reminded me, in my first term, Sidney Poitier and a number of us from Nassau, from Fox Hill, actually traveled to a town in California called Altadena. And my friends and the Methodist minister there had actually asked me, if you would believe this, to preach a sermon. And I did. Yeah, it's still online. And yes. And the sermon was actually about international affairs in the sense of the same passage that you used about the Tower of Babel. But I also referenced it that after God intervened, and it said all the languages came into being, different languages came into being. The New Testament goes on to say in the Acts of the Apostles that when the Holy Spirit descended on the apostles in the upper chamber, they all began to speak in tongues and they were able to understand one another. And I don't know if I was correct in my theology, but it sounded good at the time. But I mention that too because California is going through a really tough time. And that church has burned down, flat to the ground. The entire neighborhood, which is a historically Afro-American neighborhood, when California was a red line district and black people couldn't buy land in California, the black middle class bought land in Altadena. But the whole town has now been destroyed by the fire. So people say climate change isn't real. They don't believe it. It's a fantasy. But you know, Tyson DeGrasse said that the one thing about science is whether you believe it or not, science is true. And I just mentioned that tangentially. I want to thank, on this occasion, though, deceased George Mackey, who came to my office in December of 1996 and said, I want you to succeed me in Fox Hill. And that has led to another long journey and an engagement with a group of, and a community of people that have pride of place in my life. And it is thanks to them that I'm able to stand up here today, and I never forget that, and to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and colleagues for supporting this move in this legislation, which we foreshadowed in our Blueprint for Change, that we would ultimately create a separate foreign service. And this bill, these bills today, is designed to accomplish that objective. So my thanks to to you all. The history of this and the design of the legislation is similar to what occurs with the Ministry of Tourism. So just as there is a Department of Tourism and a Ministry of Tourism, should the House agree with these bills, there will be a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a Department of Foreign Affairs. The Department of Foreign Affairs will be run by the Director General, and just as the Department of the Ministry of Tourism is run by the Director General. So that's the construct which we're seeking to follow. I'd always wondered why. I just put it down to the influence of Stafford Sands, who was the Minister of Tourism and the Minister of Finance in the first ministerial government of the Bahamas. Before that, there was, the Bahamas was governed by a series of letters patent, and they created various levels of government. There was, of course, the House of Assembly, the Legislative Council, the Executive Council. And the House's budget, or the country's budget, was really controlled by boards. The board that controlled tourism was called the Development Board. And Stafford Sands, I believe, was the chair of the Development Board. When we got ministerial government in 1964, and the board system disappeared, and ministerial government came, and the Ministry of Tourism was created. And the Ministry of Tourism was carved out of the regular public service, which allowed them freedom of spending and decision-making. And that has survived through all of the constitutions, from the 64 one to the 69 one to the 73 one, which we have today. And that's the genesis of the idea, is that you make a corporation sole, and essentially that corporation does all the work of the ministry. Now, if you look at Articles 111 and 112 of the Constitution, people who want to serve in the position in 111, if you want to be a high commissioner or ambassador or head of an international organization as a permanent representative overseas, you need the leave of the Prime Minister to be that. That's what 111 says. 112 says that anybody else who wants to serve overseas, whether in the ministry or from some other public service department, also needs the leave of the Prime Minister to serve overseas. So in a sense, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the minister, as the chief diplomat, are agents of the office of the Prime Minister. And that's the way it works in practice today. But there's not a transparent mechanism for the country to see how that works. And so the idea now is to put all of this down in writing so that it is more transparent and objective in the way the work of the ministry is carried out. So it is an administrative measure to make things more objective, flexible, and transparent, following, as I said, the Ministry of Tourism model. When George Stewart, who was our expert on the law of the sea, passed away, I attended his funeral over at Zion Baptist Church. And the speaker at the funeral, one of the speakers at the funeral, was a man named Pericles Malis. Mr. Malis is well known with his connection with the Bahamas National Trust as a farmer out in Adelaide and as an attorney. He used to be a public servant. He used to work in the Attorney General's office. And he told the story at the funeral of how the impression was given when the British waved goodbye to us in 1973, that there was a neat little line drawn under the Bahamas, neat little package, and they said, farewell, do well, we've done the best we can do for you. When that translated, independence translated into 1973, they discovered there was no blueprint for what the ministry ought to be. No rules about visas, no rules about how you go about carrying out the provisions of the Constitution. And they, as junior officers, he at the Attorney General's office and George in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, worked together to create what we now have. The first Minister of External Affairs, as it was then called, was Lyndon Pindling. And he handed off shortly after the 1972 general election to Paul Adley. And Paul Adley served for a decade or so. And it's his imprimatur that was put on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And since then, you've had Clement Maynard, Charles Carter, who succeeded them, and then you had Janet Bostrick, Oliver Turnquest, Darren Henfield. I think that's everybody. So, but in each of those cases, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1975, Paul Adley passed an act which changed the then External Affairs Ministry into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Brant Simon had also served as minister. Thank you. Right. So, Foreign Affairs has been the instrument through which we expressed our foreign policy. And you know, in an insular country, it is necessary for you to have an aggressive and dynamic foreign affairs and interface with the outside world. Our production levels in this country for the things we consume is very low. And so we have to import almost everything we have and use here. And foreign affairs, its job is at one level to smooth the passage of any Bahamian as they go around the world. And secondly, to make sure that we have good relations and trade with every nation around the world. And what was fascinating to me is that these days, when you go to any country, we were in Samoa, and we found that a Bahamian was married to someone from Samoa. Didn't know that. In Azerbaijan, there's a Bahamian who went to university in Azerbaijan and got a degree from a university there. So where you travel, you find Bahamians far afield. And foreign affairs is supposed to help their passages around the world. So I'd like now to go through the provisions of the bill. The first bill, as I said, is that of a bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act and for connected matters. First, there's the short title and commencement, the interpretation section, and then it says in Clause 3 that there is continued under this Act, the Ministry of the Government of the Bahamas, called the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, established under Section 3.1 of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act 1975, and continued under Section 3 of the repealed Act. And the ministry continues under the general direction and control of the minister, and the minister may give general and specific directions to an officer or employee of the ministry pursuant to this Act. A reference to the Ministry of External Affairs or the Minister of External Affairs in any written agreement, instrument, or law in force, or having effect on or after the commencement of this Act, shall be construed as a reference to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, respectively, as continued under this Act. So the idea is, when this takes place, all of the things that went on before are preserved. That's the idea. And I should also say at this juncture, most conveniently, that the Director General is here with us, together with Dr. Bastian, Mr. St. Alban, who's Foreign Service Officer. Dr. Bastian is the head of the Al Ray Ramsey Institute, which I'll come to in a second. But a lot of work went in by these officers and those who serve overseas to ensure that this act was updated, and that is why we're here today. So I want to thank them, in addition to those persons that I thanked earlier. So Clause Clause 4 deals with the powers, duties, and functions of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So it says the Minister of Foreign Affairs is responsible for the conduct of all communications between the government of the Bahamas and the government of any other country, and between the government of the Bahamas and any international organization. B, for the conduct and management of international negotiations so far as they may appertain to the government of the Bahamas. C, foster the development of international law and its application in the Bahamas' external relations. And D, the developing and carrying out programs relating to the minister's powers, duties, and functions for the promotion of the Bahamas' interests abroad, including fostering expansion of international trade and commerce, and fostering sustainable international development. The minister is, in addition to the duties referred to in subsection 1, charged with other duties, powers, and functions in relation to the responsibility for any business of the government of the Bahamas, including the administration of any department of government, as the Governor General, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, may allocate to the minister pursuant to Article 77 of the Constitution. The main ones that have been added are the Passport Office, extraditions, and relations with the Parliament. And then it says that in Clause 5 that the Minister of Foreign Affairs continues under this act as a corporation sole with the power to acquire, hold, lease, and dispose of property of any description, enter into contracts to sue and be sued, all property transferred or held by the minister under or pursuant to the repealed act or any other act, or which is otherwise vested in or hereinafter becomes vested in the minister, is held by the minister in trust for Her Majesty, should be His Majesty now, in right of his government of the Bahamas. The properties that are owned by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, amongst them would be the building we own in London, where the Chancery is and where the residence of the High Commissioner is, as one example. There's a building we own in Toronto as well, in Ottawa, where the residence of the High Commissioner. We own a building in Washington, which is being refurbished, and a building in New York, as well as the residence for the ambassador in Washington and the residence for the Consul General in Washington, D.C. Clause 6 gives the power to make regulations establishing, codifying, and regulating the issuance and terms and conditions of visas for the entry of persons who are not citizens or permanent residents of the Bahamas, and for imposing fees to be charged for those services rendered by the ministry and for any matter which may be required to effectively and efficiently perform the functions of the ministry. And then Clause 7 says, every visa or document granted or issued under the repealed act and in force immediately before coming into this act continues in force after this act comes into force on the same conditions and with the same effect as if the act had not come into force. An appointment made under the repealed act continues and is valid until that appointment is rescinded, amended, or another appointment is made in its stead. So again, this is a preservation or transitional mechanism. And then Clause 8 repeals the existing Chapter 24 of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act. The second bill is the Foreign Service Bill. This is a bit more lengthy, and so I will parse as much as I can in the interest of time. But what happens now is that there is a Director General who is appointed to head a new department of the Foreign Service, and that Director General is referred to in Section 5 of this Act. And it seeks to define, make various other definitions, so I'll skip over the definition section, but the minister in this Act means the Minister for Foreign Affairs. And Section 3 says, or Clause 3 says, there is established the Department of Foreign Service for the administration of the Foreign Service. The department shall be a body corporate with perpetual succession and common seal, and may have all the responsibilities of a corporation sole or body corporate. And the department shall include the offices listed in the second schedule, and the minister may by order amend the second schedule. And after the commencement of this act, Foreign Service officers and Foreign Service employees of the department shall not be public officers for the purposes of 127C of the Constitution. And the minister may give general and specific directions to the Director General relating to foreign relations and the conduct of the affairs of the department. This is also a convenient time for me to thank, in the drafting of both of these pieces of legislation, Dame Anita Allen, Ms. Roll, Ms. Bain, and their team at the Law Reform Commission, of course, coordinated by my honorable friend, the Attorney General. Clause 4, the sources of funding for the department. may be such sums as may be voted for the purposes of the department by Parliament, such sums arising from grants, donations, and other receipts from persons, including national and international bodies, for the purposes of education, training, and professional development of diplomatic officers and staff of the department, and all fees and other sums which may in any manner become payable to the department in respect of any matter incidental to its functions. And then there shall be paid from the funds of the department salaries, grants, allowances, loans, pensions of the officers and staff of the department, such remuneration, reasonable traveling and subsistence allowance that the committee may determine for members of the committee when engaged in the business of the department, and other expenses incurred by the department in the performance of its functions. And the Director General shall be the principal accounting officer of the department for the purposes of the Public Finance Management Act. Clause 5 creates the Director General. There should be a Director General who shall be the head of the department. The Director General shall be appointed by the Minister and has responsibility for all technical matters related to the Foreign Service, including the formulation, promotion, and advancement of foreign policy, and advising the Minister on all matters relating to the Foreign Service. The Director General serves at headquarters and has the rank of Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary. Plenipotentiary means that the Director General has, like ambassadors and ministers, the ability to sign on behalf of the country and reports directly to the Minister. The academic and professional qualifications, training, and experience required for appointment as Director General shall be prescribed in the Foreign Service officers' orders, and the powers, duties, and functions of the Director General are set out in the first schedule. I'd like to turn to the second schedule, which lists diplomatic officers and non-diplomatic officers. And you see there the list of officers. The way the bill is laid out is there's those who are serving at home and those who serve postings abroad. So the at home is on the right side, on the left side, and the right side is those who are serving abroad. I think that's correct. So you've got the Director General, Chief of Protocol, Deputy Director General, Deputy Director General Legal, Deputy Director General Multilateral, Deputy Chief of Protocol Assistant, Deputy Director General, and then the level of Foreign Service officers down to Officer Cadet, Senior Protocol Officer, and Protocol Officer and Assistant Protocol Officer. And then you've got your non-diplomatic officers that include the consultant, the specialist, the finance officer, assistant finance officer, personal assistants, clerks, messengers, drivers, chauffeurs, who also serve overseas, but don't carry out diplomatic functions, but their functions are ancillary. And in the first schedule, which was referred to, it lists the powers and duties and functions of the Director General. Essentially, the Director General is the chief advisor to the Foreign Service Committee and advisor to the Minister on all of the professional and technical aspects of the work of the Foreign Service. So the way it works is if there's some issue or new matter which arises or old matter which arises, the Minister looks to the Director General, who runs the Foreign Service, for advice on what should our position be. For example, if we operate in the context of CARICOM and there's a particular matter which they are considering, then advice must come from the department as to what to do. That advice ultimately ends up with the Cabinet, and the Cabinet makes a decision for the country as to what the policies will be going forward. That's how it's designed to work in practice. If I can revert now to clause 6. The qualifications for a diplomatic and consular officer is, first, members of the Foreign Service must be citizens of the Bahamas and possess such qualifications and experiences may be prescribed in the orders. The Foreign Service is headed by the Minister, and in order of seniority, the Director General. Foreign Service officers with such hierarchy and responsibility in relation to their offices as are prescribed in the Foreign Service orders, and Foreign Service employees with such hierarchy and responsibility in relation to their employment as prescribed in the Foreign Service offices and, where applicable, their contracts of employment. And I need to mention here, since they mentioned contracts of employment, that at the moment, there are two ways you can become a Foreign Service officer. One is by joining the general public service, which is often described as permanent and pensionable officers, or you can come in as a contractual officer. My predecessors began a more active use of the use of contracts because there's a difficulty with promotions, pay, those sorts of things, and so I think that was a problem, a mechanism for solving it, and that's now the preferred mechanism for hiring, but it's anticipated that with the change in the regime, that these pay issues, promotion issues will be addressed, which have been lagging now for almost 5 to 6 years. Some people have come in as administrative cadets and have been serving at the top of the chain as acting high commissioners with the substantive position of an entry-level job. And this is because the whole project of change came to an end once we lost office in 2017. Now, Clause 7, appointment to the service. The appointment of a person to the Foreign Service as an ambassador high commissioner, as I said, must be done in accordance with Article 111 of the Constitution, which calls for the sign-off of the Prime Minister. And the appointment of any other officer who's going to serve overseas must also be done in accordance with Article 1112 with the leave of the Prime Minister. And the appointment to an officer serving at headquarters will be the Minister after consultation with the Foreign Service Committee. The Foreign Service Committee is now established. It is basically a continuation of what happened when the Act was last amended. So it is an advisory body with responsibility to advise and make recommendations to the Prime Minister and the Minister respectively in relation to the appointments referred to in Section 7. And the Foreign Service Committee shall have power to hear in respect of posting, promotion, transfer, or secondment of persons appointed under subsection 2, grievances, disciplinary actions, appeals in relation to appointments, and the review of remuneration and allowances. And then it lists who can be members of the Foreign Service Committee. The Minister shall appoint the chairperson from amongst the members. The Director General shall be the chief advisor to the Foreign Service Committee. The members of the Foreign Service Committee shall be paid a fee as approved by the Minister. This is the point at which I should say that there's going to be an amendment. Yes, we'll propose an amendment because the clause as it now listed does not give a time limit for the appointment, and we think that this should be remedied by the members of the Foreign Service Committee shall be appointed for a term of 3 years and may be reappointed for a further term. And this is consonant with what comes next in Clause 9, where if you are aggrieved by some decision which is made, you can go to the Foreign Service Appeal Tribunal, and that Foreign Service Appeal Tribunal is able to make a decision on whether to uphold or change whatever the recommendations are. So the idea is to make this more transparent. You know, those of us who are lawyers know that there is this duty to act fairly, which is incorporated into our administrative law. And so the idea is to import this into the way that promotions, transfers, those things work. For example, in the present rules, you get a 3-year appointment overseas, which can be renewed for another 3 years, but after that, you're supposed to come home. Some people have been away 9, 12 years, and what has happened is that often people develop attachments to the places where they stay. This becomes a security issue for the country. The idea is that you should be shuffling people around. They should always come back home and have the experience of not being too far out front from where home is and the experience of being back home. But that's been a problem. I mean, the United States had gotten to the point where they had imposed a rule that no one would be allowed to stay in the States beyond 5 years, because 5 years was the threshold for being able to apply for permanent residence in the U.S., and they wanted to cut that avenue off. So that's some of the issues related to that. So hopefully this will bring a more transparent system to it. Now, Clause 10 provides for the transfer of all public officers with their consent. And this includes contract officers and those who were hired directly as permanent and pensionable officers. Clause 11 protects their pensions and says that nobody can come over with anything which is less valuable than they had at the time they came over, and protects the pension payments. But also, in Clause 12, gives a mandate to the new department to create a contributory pension. But it says, until the contributory pension is created, the pension of officers who transfer from the public service will remain the same benefit and will be chargeable and payable out of the consolidated fund. So the idea is that no one loses anything, anything which they brought over from the department, from the old order. It is my understanding that the Ministry of Finance is in some stage of developing a contributory pension for new employees of the public service, and so it's my anticipation that it would probably be most convenient for us to await that, so those people can avail themselves of that contributory pension. Just to underline the point, Clause 12.6 says, every public officer who held a pensionable office under the government of the Bahamas before the commencement of this act and who transferred to the department shall continue to receive a pension under the Pensions Act until the benefits plan is established under subsection 1B. All right, 13, the Bahamas Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs. There is established for the purposes of this act a diplomatic training center known as the Bahamas Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, and we've begun to call it BARIFA inside the ministry, which shall be responsible for the training and diplomacy of all foreign service officers in the department. You may recall that Mr. Ramsey was a young officer who died in unexplained circumstances, or unsatisfactorily explained circumstances in Turin, Italy. We were hoping that the Institute was established maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and we were hoping to have an official ceremony. Sadly, both his parents have now died, so they won't be around. The father died a year or two ago. The mother died just last year. So they won't be, neither parent will be, but his sister, I hope, is able to join us on the 30th of January to mark the occasion of the formal naming of the Institute. And I believe that he was a fine example of a diplomat. He was the main point person for our successes at the election to the Human Rights Council, having run the first campaign. And we didn't succeed then, came close, but his groundwork led to the second campaign and our success on the Bahamas Human Rights Council. He is respected, or was respected by, and is respected by his colleagues at the Foreign Ministry, and we think that this is an appropriate way to remember his contribution. And in particular, because he was a young man. The church that I attend is called St. Agnes, and those of you who know the history of St. Agnes, I believe she was a 14 or 15-year-old when she became a martyr and was named a saint of the church. And so it's my thinking that you don't have to be of advanced age to be honored by your country. It is possible, and we see this, of course, with our athletes and the success of our academics and musicians. It is possible as a young person to make a contribution to your country, and more importantly, to be honored by your country for that contribution. So I remember him on this day, and on behalf of the ministry, I will thank the House for agreeing to this provision. Clause 14 is the Foreign Service orders. The minister may, after consultation with the Foreign Service Committee, make orders to govern and regulate the Foreign Service of the Bahamas and the conduct and classification, ranks, and terms and conditions of service thereof for Foreign Service officers and Foreign Service employees, including non-Bahamian staff locally employed at a mission, and providing for such other matters as may be required in order for the department to effectively and efficiently perform the functions of the department. And then in Clause 15, the regulations, the minister may, after consultation with the Foreign Service Committee, make regulations establishing, codifying, and regulating the issuance and terms and conditions of visas for the entry of persons who are not citizens or permanent residents of the Bahamas, and imposing fees to be charged for consular services, including fees for the physical delivery of passports, visas, and other documents by courier services to persons making application for consular services. And of course, the last provision, Clause 16, is the savings and transitional provision. Every document, it says, granted or issued under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act in force immediately before the coming into force of this Act, continues in force after the commencement of this Act, and the same conditions and with the same effect as if this Act had not come into force. An appointment made under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act before the coming into force of this Act continues and is valid until that appointment is revoked, amended, or another appointment is made under this Act. On the date of commencement of this Act, the department operating within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and known as the Department of Foreign Affairs is replaced by the department established under this Act. All legal obligations and liabilities of the Department of Foreign Affairs shall be the obligations and liabilities of the department, and the person who holds the post of Director General shall continue in that post as if the person was appointed under this Act. And every Foreign Service officer or Foreign Service employee who held a post in the Department of Foreign Affairs shall continue in that post as if it was granted under this Act. And I hesitate a bit there because I remember Kevin Bethel always say it is as if it were granted, not as if it was, but such is life. I want to, therefore, say those are the two acts. I'm seeking the support of the House on this, and as I end where I began, it's been a long journey. This may be, given the exigencies of life, may be a defining moment in my political career, but I think it's an important moment if it's not a defining moment, because I hope with the passage of this that I've accomplished the promise which I made to Foreign Service officers in my first stint in 2002, that we would have a discrete Foreign Service for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a seconder? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Nassau Village.
Morning. Madam Speaker, let me firstly start by thanking God for bringing us here safely today and giving us the gift of life. But I would also like to recognize in the gallery members of the Nassau Village branch of the Progressive Liberal Party who came here today to support me. I'd just like to recognize them. Madam Speaker, I would also like to thank the people, the good people of Nassau Village, my people, who have trusted me to stand in this place and represent them. Their support is the reason I'm here today, and I carry their hopes and challenges with me. I rise to second the Foreign Service Bill 2024 and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill 2024. Madam Speaker, this is truly a new day. Our Progressive Liberal Party government has long declared a day of opportunity, a day of change, and a day of progress. And I am proud, Madam Speaker, to be working alongside with my colleagues to make that vision a reality for not just Nassau Village constituents, but for each and every Bahamian across the length and breadth of this Bahama land. Madam Speaker, while I was at university, I took a profound interest in Greek mythology. And one of my favorite Greek philosophers was Socrates, as some may call him. Madam Speaker, another great philosopher would have been Heraclitus. He was a man consumed with the idea that a world was in constant change. He rightly observed that a man never treads the same river twice, because it's never the same river, and he is no longer the same man. Madam Speaker, I stand before this honorable House as someone who once walked the halls of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a young, bright-eyed Foreign Service officer. I remember long hours. I remember relentless writing. I remember careful note-taking and the quiet hope that one day my country, our country, would recognize the great work that I would have put in. Too often, Madam Speaker, the dedicated service of the Foreign Service officers is mischaracterized or underappreciated because of the lack of transparency and oftentimes political volleying around election time. However, Madam Speaker, I say to both colleagues and members opposite that those dedicated Foreign Service officers are truly the foundation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They are the beating heart. Madam Speaker, day after day, they labor tirelessly in service of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. They may just be another protocol officer that walks you to your seat, but we must understand that through this and the development of these mechanisms, we will be nurturing them to move far and beyond and become our ambassadors, become our foreign ministers, and become our parliamentary secretaries. And we must have a framework that's fit for purpose and reflects our respect for their work. Madam Speaker, I take this moment to give my sincerest thanks to those men and women who first laid the foundation. Sir Lyndon Pinlan as the Minister of Home Affairs, but also Sir Charles Carter, my predecessor, who was the member of Holy Cross, which is now the Nassau Village constituency. Madam Speaker, their professionalism and pride represent our Bahama land on the world stage. Their tireless dedication ensured that our national interests were protected abroad. Madam Speaker, from those humble beginnings as a junior officer to my current lofty position as parliamentary secretary, I stand a different man, a better man. Yet, I cannot help but observe the age-old sayings of the Greek philosopher, Heraclitus. And that is why these bills are timely and needed. Madam Speaker, this administration is determined to change the effectiveness of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and craft it into a seamless machine. This Progressive Liberal Party government, under the strong leadership of the Honorable Philip Brave Davis, has taken decisive steps to reform and modernize, to reduce waste, and to strengthen the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Madam Speaker, through the Foreign Service Bill 2024 and the accompanying bill, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill 2024, we aim to establish a robust department for foreign service with clear structures and defined roles for diplomatic and administrative staff. The reason for this, Madam Speaker, is that everybody wants to know how their development will be carried out. They need clearly defined roles so that they can operate effectively at each tier. This bill will codify and structure that so as to ensure the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is stronger and moving forward. Madam Speaker, the bill also creates the Bahamas Alray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs to ensure our officers are trained to the highest standards of diplomacy. Each member would know that from time immemorial, we had to send our diplomats abroad to receive training, to India, to Trinidad, to the US. But the reality is that our domestic challenges can only be articulated domestically. So with the creation of the Bahamas Alray Institute, that is BARIFA, as we refer to it, we will ensure that the domestic perspective of the Bahamas is ingrained in each and every diplomat going forward. And I would just like to take the time to pause, Madam Speaker, because, and as the Minister would know, Alray Ramsey and myself would have started the Ministry of Foreign Affairs together. An excellent young man who spoke 5 languages, right? His key was Japanese, French, and Spanish. So when he passed and turned, Madam Speaker, it was truly a blow to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also a blow to his cohort, who saw nothing but talent for him as he would have matured. Madam Speaker, as we return back to the bill empowers our ministry to better manage its own operations, generate its own revenue, and reduce dependency on taxpayer funds. Madam Speaker, as someone who has seen the ideas brewing for years, it is both an honor and a privilege to witness them finally coming to fruition. It is this PLP government, though, Madam Speaker, that spoke of reforms. It is this PLP government that has once again delivered on the promise to strengthen the backbone of diplomacy. Madam Speaker, there are leaders who assume their roles, and from day one, you can see that they have a dictatorship mentality to them, wielding their administrative powers against technical experts and hard workers. But not this administration, Madam Speaker. We have charted a different course, one that recognizes the invaluable contributions of our Foreign Service officers and prioritizes their good training, expertise, and dedication. At no better time, Madam Speaker, could these reforms come into effect. As the good book reminds us, we live in times of war and rumors of war. We face mounting instability in our region, particularly in our neighborhood of Haiti. The challenges of climate change threaten our very existence as an island nation. No matter which challenge we face, though, Madam Speaker, whether frequent storms at home or those political storms abroad, never has there been a more pressing time to revamp the branch of government that has the first engagement internationally, being the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Madam Speaker, that is why my story, and it was a little story, had to be told. That is why now these bills have to be brought forward, debated, and approved. Madam Speaker, together these bills lay the foundation for a modern, professional, and agile Ministry of Foreign Affairs and diplomatic service. The Bahamas' presence on the global stage will only and undoubtedly be enhanced. The Foreign Service Bill 2024 focuses on the establishment and administration of the Department of Foreign Service. This bill formalizes the structure of our Foreign Service, ensuring that our diplomatic and consular officers have clearly defined roles and career paths. It establishes a clear professional hierarchy ranging from Foreign Service cadet to ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary, which will attract and retain the best talent to represent our nation. By outlining their hierarchy, qualifications, and responsibilities, Madam Speaker, the bill emphasizes professionalism and excellence, equipping our Foreign Service to tackle the complexities of a modern diplomatic world. A pivotal component, as I mentioned before, of the bill is the creation and formalization of the Bahamas Alray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs. And, Madam Speaker, we look forward to recruiting talented individuals into the Foreign Service. We implore them to come forward with their myriad of talents and understand that this ministry is one progressive. This ministry is one dedicated to national development, and we are a ministry that will continue to keep up. Madam Speaker, the Institute is designed to emulate foreign ministries around the world, which we all have trained as diplomats before. Further, the Foreign Service Bill establishes a body corporate, Madam Speaker, with the power to manage its own affairs, including acquiring property, entering into contracts, and establishing accounts. This was crafted off of the Ministry of Tourism, and in an attempt to ensure that the ministry has the agility to perform each and every task in a timely manner. This independence is crucial for the agile diplomacy required in today's fast-moving world. Additionally, provisions for the Foreign Service Committee and Appeal Tribunal ensure that our diplomatic corps operates with transparency and fairness, providing proper channels for oversight and the resolution of grievances. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill 2024, on the other hand, reinforces the institutional framework of the ministry itself. It ensures the continuation of the ministry as a corporate entity, granting it the legal and administrative strength to function effectively. The bill, Madam Speaker, meticulously sets out the powers and duties of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, empowering them to act decisively in the nation's best interest, while ensuring accountability and transparency. The Minister's responsibility includes conducting official communications, fostering international trade, and promoting sustainable development. Madam Speaker, I'm sure that even the members opposite will appreciate the bill's provisions for regulatory oversight and accountability. In this case, the Minister is granted clear authority to establish visa regulations and impose the appropriate fees for consular services, ensuring that our operations are both efficient and responsive to national needs. Together, Madam Speaker, these bills create a comprehensive framework for modern diplomacy. They establish clear lines of authority, professional standards, and operational procedures that will guide our foreign service for generations to come. Madam Speaker, this framework not only modernizes our foreign service, but also positions the Bahamas as a strong and more agile participant in international relations. Madam Speaker, these reforms embody our vision for a professional, capable, and modern diplomatic service. They provide the tools and structure necessary for our foreign service officers to excel in their crucial mission of representing and defending the Bahamas' interests abroad. By formalizing our foreign service structure, establishing dedicated training institutions, and reinforcing the ministry's institutional framework, we are ensuring that the nation is not just a participant, but a leader on the world stage. Madam Speaker, I would also like to mention the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, once again, as a body corporate and a financial management body. It creates an institution that can respond immediately to needs. The Foreign Service Committee will provide oversight without creating bureaucratic bottlenecks. The Bahamas Allery Ramsey Institute will ensure our diplomats are trained not just in diplomatic protocol, but in effective resource management. Madam Speaker, members opposite might ask, won't creating or streamlining the ministry cause or create institutional costs? But, Madam Speaker, I'm of the belief that once you streamline the workings of the ministry already generates a significant amount of revenue for the Treasury, so it will ultimately be self-sustaining. By eliminating administrative redundancies, by preventing the costly delays I've described, and by ensuring decisions are made by those with relevant expertise and experiences. These reforms will actually generate significant savings for the Bahamas taxpayer. Madam Speaker, in diplomacy, as in many things, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And when our interests are on the line, we need a clear and technical answer. Madam Speaker, let me address head-on what most people may have as a misconception that the Bahamas travels frequently. But the reality is that the travel budget is minuscule in the overall budget of the country, some 0.002% of the overall budget, not even 0.5%, and also 0.025% of the ministry's overall budget, which isn't significant at all. But Madam Speaker, it may surprise many of our constituents and the viewers watching to learn that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs stands as the largest revenue generator in our government outside of the Treasury itself. Yes, Madam Speaker, you heard that correctly. Through the provision of essential services, apostille certifications, document legalizations, passport issuances, visa processing and procurement, and other consular services, our ministry generates a substantial revenue that contributes significantly to our national coffers.
Modern customs?
Madam Speaker, I hope members opposite consider the reality that when a business person needs the documents legalized internationally, they come to us. When a student requires authentication of their academic credentials, they come to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. When visitors seek visas to experience our beautiful Bahamaland, they come to us. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs generates significant revenue that far exceeds our operational cost. Madam Speaker, these bills before us today will enhance this revenue-generating capacity by streamlining our operations. The establishment of the Department of Foreign Service as a body corporate means that for the first time, we can manage these revenues more effectively, reinvesting in our diplomatic infrastructure while continuing to contribute substantially to the national treasury. Madam Speaker, what our government will not do, and I can promise you this, is take lectures on how to move forward with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This PLP administration before us has laid out a robust plan to open new embassies around the world to increase our footprint. Sadly, most members would recall that in 2017, when we became the opposition, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs grinded to a staggering halt. There were no embassies open with the exception of Brussels that was already in train. The ministry didn't expand its influence globally, but more so we took a more insular approach to foreign affairs. And now we find ourselves having to aggressively move forward, which we have done, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you would recall the opening of the embassy in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. You would recall the opening of the consulate in Toronto, Canada, another opening of the consulate in Jamaica, and continued progress for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to ensure that the Bahamas is represented internationally and the Bahamas is brought to the forefront as a leader in global affairs. Madam Speaker, our ministry has a proud history of showing up anywhere where our interests are on the line. Our early example is of Celine Pinlan, who went to Uganda and South Africa, calling for an end to apartheid and discrimination. The Bahamas can ill afford to be left out of such important decisions as this global world becomes even more unpredictable. For this reason, Madam Speaker, the government has continued to support the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we have continued to push forward. In conclusion on this point, Madam Speaker, these bills are strengthening one of the government's most significant revenue streams. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is a major contributor to the Treasury, and these reforms will only enhance that contribution. Madam Speaker, as we bring this discussion to a close and these measures closer to reality, let us consider the reform before us. These bills represent not just an update to our laws, but a bold step into the future, a future where the Bahamas will stand tall on the world stage with a foreign ministry that is professional, efficient, and reflective. Madam Speaker, as I've said before, this PLP government is not here to make excuses or repeat the errors of the past. Our government offers a clear window through which Bahamian people can see our commitment to transparency, accountability, and excellence. Madam Speaker, remember that these reforms create the framework for a foreign ministry that is not only self-sustaining, but looks ahead. We have the plan, and the time is now to streamline operations, eliminate waste, and ensure that every dollar spent is brought back to the Bahamas twofold. Madam Speaker, as Heraclitus said, and I repeat where I start, you cannot tread the same river twice. And I thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I thank the Prime Minister, the Director General, the heads of mission, and all of the Foreign Service officers who I stand in support of, as well as my constituents of Nassau Village, for being the voice of change in this new wave of prosperity and efficiency in our country. I take pleasure in seconding this bill, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Alray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, and related purposes. Asmini? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank Almighty God for this opportunity to once again represent the people of Marco City and the wider Bahamas in this House of Assembly. Madam Speaker, I'd like to begin by extending condolences to a number of families who've lost loved ones since we were last in this House, and to let them know that we are praying for them and praying that God would provide peace in the midst of their deep loss and personal sorrow, and assure them that He's able to heal the deepest wounds, fill the deepest vacuums left by those who've departed. We remember in this regard, Madam Speaker, Meritorious Council Member Louise Bosfield. Just last week, we were in the straw market in Grand Bahama addressing some of the concerns that continue to persist. And one of the persons who played a pivotal role in raising issues in Port Lucaya in general, among vendors in particular, Antoinette Smith, unfortunately has passed. We remember Pastor David Wallace, Mary Carol Johnson, Asa Thompson, Ludell Theophilus, Alquenia Bastian, and from Little Creek, South Andres, Rebecca Knowles, and a long-standing supporter, Alton Robinson, and of course, Willamay Sawyer, who many of us on both sides of the divide know very well. And I had the opportunity to travel on the weekend as Sister Arlene in North Abaco was eulogized. And we also remember Matthew Mizik, who again is well respected in the community of Grand Bahama for the work that he has done, not just at Borco, but in the community. And we want to say to the family, we stand with you. Madam Speaker, before I get into the bills before us, and we do support the work that has been done by successive administrations in moving foreign affairs ahead. We do not agree with the nonsensical statement just made that foreign affairs came to a grinding halt. We can't, in one hand, celebrate the work of public servants who continue to represent this country with distinction, and then for political cheap points get up and make the point that nothing was done for a 4.5-year period, which is absolutely ludicrous. And so we celebrate those public servants who continued to work. Madam Speaker, I've had a cause to bring to the attention of the present minister, who did in fact make some phone calls and intervene, that some members of our team received letters at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs restating what the public service position is on persons who may be active politically and still work for government. We found it laughable. I presume the minister did as well, because he certainly intervened on the matter that I raised with him. Because all we need to do is look at social media and see the number of persons who are members, active members, holding office in the Progressive Liberal Party, who work in multiple ministries, some of whom spend more time on social media than they do doing the people's work. And so it is our hope that if such letters, that we know for a fact such letters were sent to some of our supporters, we have a list, I'm sure, of a couple of hundred from the other side who those letters should have been sent to, Madam Speaker. But before we get into the meat of the matter, Madam Speaker, it is incumbent upon me, it would be a dereliction of duty, not to address some statements that were made in the House, not in the immediate aftermath of members of the opposition being removed, but days later, when the government and the Speaker would have had an opportunity to see the legislation, to see the legislation that empowers the Speaker in terms of what the Speaker is able to do in the event that such matters arise. But more important than the legislation that you would have had a chance to review, we were concerned that the film that was available, the film here in the House, the film that the media took, flew in the face of the facts of what has been stated by the...
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fox Hill.
At the start, this is a debate about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not to rehash what happened here 3 weeks ago. That issue is dead. Well, no, you could go and whatever political proselytizing you want to do, but this is not the appropriate place for that. If the member wants to raise that matter, he can do so on a substantive motion. He can do a notice and all the rest of it. But this is not the appropriate place for that. And I do not want.
So let us stay on course as we allow you to complete.
Madam Speaker, my point is, this is a debate about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act. We're not going to be derailed by rehashing old history. And I am, you don't have to listen to it, you can plug your frickin' ears. Yeah. So that is my point of order. There's a rule on relevance. I started off, this is going to be a carefully scripted debate on the subject matter at hand, not deviating on nonsense.
Thank you, honourable member. Honourable member, let's stay on cue with the debate today.
I work for the Bahamian people. I don't work for any member in this House alone. You're part of that broader group of persons who I serve, and so I'll continue to serve you with distinction. But far more important than the individual opinions in here are the opinions of the people outside. And those same people have a right to hear from us on what the facts are relative to that particular day. And so the point I'm making, Madam Speaker, is yes, Madam.
Stick with the rules, or we are going to close the debate. This is rubbish. Don't come here derailing things and talking nonsense. This debate is about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, not about old history.
Madam Speaker, I indicated,
thank you, honourable
as
member.
is customary in this place, that I have a series, Madam Speaker, of questions. In fact, 18 questions related to the bill that does not hinder our support of the bill, but matters raised by some of the staff members of your ministry and otherwise for clarification that can assist in the successful implementation of the bills that you've brought that this side fully intends to support. However, no, but listen, you do not get to dictate the format and the manner in which I speak. I did not interrupt you, and you are not in any position to determine how I present today. So, Madam Speaker, as I was saying, one of the statements that I heard both by the Prime Minister and the Speaker, in our view, sought to attribute injuries to the Sergeant-at-Arms, as well as the Deputy Speaker, to the opposition, which was false.
The chair recognizes the honourable member
Which
for
was
Fox Hill.
absolutely false, and in fact,
The
film...
relevance.
Yes.
The rule on relevance.
Honourable member for Marco City.
film clearly showed that
Honourable member.
a false statement made by the Prime Minister and a false statement made by the Speaker, statements that went around the world.
member is
We have a
incorrect.
right to defend. We have
Member for
a
Marco City.
right
The matter was referred to the committee.
And that is what I'm saying. Honourable
So it's sub
member.
judice. Do you want to
Honourable
close this
member,
debate?
allow me.
to correct the record.
I
Allow
move-
me.
I move, Madam Speaker, the question now be put. Do I have a seconder?
Is there a seconder?
Nobody's going to second that.
Thank you, honorable member.
No one will second that.
The member for Golden Gates did second.
Where did he second? We didn't hear a second?
She did. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill, that the question be now put.
We're saying we did not hear the second.
Honorable member for Golden Gates did second. As many are in favor, it will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The question will now be put.
Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, and the establishment of the Bahamas Alray Ramsey Institute for Foreign Affairs and related purposes. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Alray Ramsey Institute for Foreign Affairs and related purposes.
I now move, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill 2024, bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act and for connected matters.
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected purposes. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected matters.
For the second reading and committal bills?
No further second reading. Madam Speaker, I now move that the House to dissolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded the House to now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House will now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair.
Committee of the Whole.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill 2024, I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The long title of the bill is agreed.
I now move, Madam Speaker, Mr. Chairman, that Clause 1, the short title and commencement of the bill, be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried.
The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I now move that clauses 2 through 8 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved, and the chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
The good leader of government business should note and read Clause 5.2 and make amendment to Clause 5.2. It refers to Her Majesty's government. Her Majesty died in 2022. This bill was tabled in 2024. It's referring to property belonging to a dead person. This is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs praised bill.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
The member knows the interpretation of General Clauses Act means his means hers and hers
Very
means
sloppy,
his.
very sloppy.
Thank you, honorable member. It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 8 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Clauses 2 through 8 of the bill is agreed.
I now move, Mr. Chairman, that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, now the Foreign Service Bill. I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The long title of the bill is agreed.
I now move, Mr. Chairman, that the short title clause 1 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The short title of the bill is agreed.
I now move, Mr. Chairman, that clauses 2 through 7 of the bill be agreed.
Two.
2 through 7.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 7 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Clauses 2 through 7 is agreed.
I now move, Mr. Chairman, that clause 8 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 8 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain. Oh, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Central and South Eleuthera.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. I make an amendment to Clause 8 of the bill. Amendment to be made is A, renumber subclauses 5 to 8 as subclauses 6 to 9, and B, insert immediately after subclause 4 the following. Number 5, the members of the Foreign Service Committee shall be appointed for a term of 3 years and may be reappointed for a further term of 3 years.
Thank you, honorable member. It has been moved and seconded that the bill be amended as read. Amended as read. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The bill is amended as read.
Chairman, I now move that clauses 9 through 16 of the bill be agreed.
9 through
16.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 9 through 16 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Clauses 9 through 16 is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I now move that the first and second schedules of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the first and second schedule of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The first and second schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The motion is carried. The bill in its entirety is agreed. Honorable members, members.
I now move, Mr. Chairman, that the House do resume with the Speaker in the chair.
It has been moved and seconded that the Speaker do now take the chair. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The Speaker will now take the chair.
Honorable members, the chairman and the committee of the whole has reported that the committee has examined the bills, having made amendments thereto. Third reading and passing?
There are no further second readings, Madam Speaker.
No further second reading. No further second reading, yes.
And Madam Speaker, I would move for the third reading of the Foreign Services Bill 2024.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and pass. A bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs and related purposes. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Al Ray Ramsey Institute for Foreign Affairs and related purposes.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Foreign Service Act 2024. For the third reading?
Madam Speaker, I move for the third reading and passage of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill 2024.
Thank you, honorable members. Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. A bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected purposes. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read for a third time and pass.
A bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected matters.
Ordered that the bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act 2024. For the third reading and passing of bills?
No further third reading and passing, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. It is ordered that the bills passed in this honorable House today be forwarded to the honorable Senate for their concurrence. We'll now proceed down the order of business. Consideration of Senate amendments, resolutions, member statements. The Honorable Member for Kalani. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Very disappointed that the debate came to a halt.
As am I.
Haven't spent all night preparing. But Madam Speaker, with respect to my constituency, I had great discussion, elaborate discussion with my constituents, members of my constituency with respect to the bill. And they had several concerns, and I expressed their concern. There are many members of our society who had made contribution to the Foreign Affairs Service, and they want to know whether other names were considered in the establishment of the Al Ray Ramsey Institute. Example, George Stewart, whom all of you would know, and his contribution to foreign affairs, Missouri Sherman, her contribution, and of course, Beverly Whitfield. She was chief protocol for a long time, guiding the protocol procedures within this country, and they're concerned as to whether or not these individuals were considered. Then the other issue that affects my constituency, Madam Speaker, the issue of citizenship. The issue of citizenship. There are individuals within my constituency who had asked that I bring this point forth. We have many young people who were born here and qualify under the Constitution for citizenship. But our procedure is that they wait, constitutionally, they must wait for a certain age limit. And even beyond that, it may take them a longer time to receive their citizenship and necessary documents. But, Madam Speaker, they face serious problems. And I want the Bahamian people to understand this. Imagine if you're in a situation where you're born here, you qualify for citizenship, etc. But because of what happens in that particular country, you, member for Fort Charlotte, cannot open a bank account. You are accepted into a university to pursue higher education because they recognize how bright you are and offering you scholarship. But because you're fixed in this cocoon, and I'm speaking about members of my society, constituent, because you're fixed in this cocoon, you cannot go off to university. So basically, your life is being basically hampered. Then, Madam Speaker, that poses a problem also with traveling. And you, Mr. Sayers, member for Fort Charlotte, not personally, but you are in a cocoon where even you cannot obtain certain jobs that you are qualified to do and perform, but instead you are locked within a system where you basically have to take remedial jobs, etc. No, Madam Speaker, these are serious issues. And some of the recommendations that they've put forth to me, and I would advise that we look at it, many of them are within our school system. Why can't we enact a system where once they have reached grade 10, 11, then they're automatically logged in to a catalog, a log within the ministry, so that all information commences at that time, so that at age 18, it's only a rubber stamp, and therefore they can go off and make their contribution. Why I'm so concerned about this, I would remember a particular case. a young lady who was born here was recognized as an outstanding athlete in this country. She could not represent the Bahamas because she had no status. But then, recognizing the contribution and the asset she was to the Bahamas, within 24 hours, she was given citizenship, just so that she can go and represent the Bahamas. It's not right. We're cherry picking. Because that one is making great contribution, we give papers. But others who are not making that type of contribution, but there are different types of contribution in the athletic and the non-athletic. And those are issues that face my constituency, that face members within my constituency. And I ask that we look seriously at that. It's a matter that has to be addressed.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marco City.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to also read into the record additional names. Additional names, Madam Speaker, of outstanding Foreign Service workers: the Honorable Joshua Sayers, Teresa Butler, Carlton Wright, Marilyn Zonical, L.B. Johnson, Dr. Davidson Hepburn, all of whom are long-standing contributors to foreign policy development in the country and have served with distinction overseas. Madam Speaker, I'd like to make mention to those residents in Marco City. We are in the process of completing the Marco City Tech Hub, which will teach all things technology in terms of helping persons with short-term courses so that they are able to gain successful employment. We expect that we'll be open just before the summer. And so certainly we will continue to tour of the building with various members of the community. Madam Speaker, members of Marco City, like Kalani, like St. Barnabas, St. Anne's, East Grand Bahama, and Central Grand Bahama, have a right to know that their members did not contribute to any physical harm that came to anyone in this House, contrary to what was said and intimated by both the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the House. We have a right to put that on the public record, and the journalists who are here in the gallery all have footage of exactly what happened. So it is disturbing. It is disturbing that more than a week later, having had a chance to review the footage, they repeated the same untruths on the record in the House and outside of the House. And so we wanted to put that on the record, and we have a right to put that on the record. And as a former activist, it is a shame that you are attempting to dictate what we say in the House of Assembly. It's a shame. And so, Madam Speaker, I'm on my feet. You can do it. You can speak in member statement. I am afraid to hear what you have to say. And Madam, there's a point of order in member statement. I didn't know. Also, Madam Speaker, I wish to say.
The Speaker recognizes.
Sorry, member, I will allow you just as soon as his 5 minutes.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Sit down.
Residents of Marco City. Residents of Marco City, Madam Speaker, still desire to have transparent investigations carried out in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and for law enforcement officials to then report on those. But today, Madam Speaker, we say that the member, Madam Speaker, for Freetown has a duty in the House of Assembly to report on matters related to his ministry. We find it stunning that in our discussion we were racking our brain to find out when did the member for Freetown report on the range of serious issues in a government communication which is required by law on the number of matters that are in his portfolio. We are hoping that in the next sitting of Parliament, we'll begin to hear from the Member of Parliament for Freetown, who would report on a number of serious matters related to his portfolio that have caused deep concern in the country, not just locally, but also has impacted our international reputation. That is a requirement by law for such communications to be brought. And to date, we are struggling to find where these range of issues that have created challenges for the country have, in fact, been addressed. And Madam Speaker, we give notice that we intend to lay in the House a compilation of the procurement information that has been provided by the government, but not in the manner, in our view, outlined by law. And so, commencing in the next sitting of Parliament, we will lay out those contracts that have been signed, many of which are not at all complying with the Procurement Act, have not gone through the competitive bidding, but have been single source without the details of who's received it, what amount they have been allocated in terms of how much we have to pay them back in terms of interest rate. We do intend to lay a number of those matters on the table for the public to examine. Grand Bahama is still crying out for the fire station. Still crying out for the fire station issues to be addressed and for the trucks to be provided.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Foxhill.
First, I'd like to address, Madam Speaker, the inquiry made by the most honourable former Prime Minister. As it relates to the consideration of who would receive the particular honour. George Stewart has a library which is named after him. There was a ceremony maybe 2 years ago, because of his contribution to Law of the Sea. So there is a library. As you know, a purpose-built building is in the process of design work. It's very fundamental, but the idea is eventually that there'll be a proper library, but there is a library now. If you come to the ministry, you will see that there's a library which is dedicated to George Stewart. And he, as I said in my own presentation earlier today, he was really an important contributor to the development. I would say the same thing about Mrs. Whitfield. Certainly there's an honor which must come to her. There's no question about that. But in the circumstances of all the younger people who form the cohort that the Parliamentary Secretary spoke about, we felt that it was necessary to give some support to their aspirations, that you don't have to reach advanced age in order to be honored by your country or respected by your country. So that's the reason the name was settled, that particular name was settled. As for the only reason I was getting up on the point of order before was he has a right, Madam Speaker, to address whatever points he wishes. And that's not a question which was before me. The question is, when is the appropriate forum, according to the rules, for those inputs to be made? Nobody has an issue. You can say whatever you wish to say. And secondly, the point at which I was getting up was when it starts coming at me about I'm an activist and I should know better and all the rest of it. I mean, that kind of hectoring is not for in here. I mean, if you want to, be jocular and cuss me out outside, that's fine. But in here, I mean, you make your point, and fine, I respond to the point. And I can have something in store for you, buddy.
The honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
Speaker, the honourable member for me raised a very important question, and we know that this has been a persistent concern within our country for decades. Article 7 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, those persons who are born here, neither of whose parents are citizens of the country, have a constitutional entitlement to apply between the age of 18 and 19 for Bahamian citizenship. These are young people who have been socialized, educated in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and we take this constitutional responsibility very seriously. We've been processing those applications very expeditiously, but there are concerns which the honorable member would know about. One is that the Immigration Department around 2017 went online. And in making a decision to go online, it was prospective. So you have, therefore, thousands of applications which were in the possession of the Immigration Department were put in storage. And persons who had applied, coming back to the Immigration Department, would find that their application was not online. Some were asked to submit applications again. It was a source of genuine frustration. In February of last year, we made a decision to establish a dedicated group of immigration officers to do every day scan all of those files which are in storage so that we would have the digital copies of those files and they could be migrated to the online system. And they've done a marvelous job because every day that is what they do. Right up on Hawkins Hill on the eastern side in a storage facility, they have been working. The second thing, initiative is to get all of the citizenship and also permanent residency application and processing online. And that is being done so that we can have a more reliable queuing of the application and the timely delivery in terms of those who would have applied first would have the first consideration and processing. So I want the public to know that this is a matter which the Immigration Department takes very seriously, and we're working aggressively for the timely processing, and also it has to be done with care to avoid and to detect any fraudulent documents.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much. I know I've spoken already, but I want to thank the member for Fort Charlotte for that response. I'm sure that my constituents are listening and they accept that. But is there any possibility, we know that individuals who are in the school system now, grade 11, 12, is there a possibility that you can make provisions where they may send in something now so that they would be in the system and they can, obviously everything is online, but they can automatically be prioritized so that they can pursue higher education. You know, sometimes it can be a delay, and a delay of 4 months can force them to lose a scholarship, etc. And they want to make contribution to their country.
It's a very relevant question because most of these persons would have a status known as belonger status. So most of the persons who have such status, well, the persons who have such status will be known to the Immigration Department. There is a policy group, and also Dame Anita Allen has been working with a lawyer from an immigration officer who's a lawyer to amend the Immigration Act so that we can have an earlier entry point for the consideration as opposed to waiting until the age of 18. And as you have indicated, it is possible. And any persons in any member's constituency, and certainly Galan, any matters of hardship that you become aware of, to please refer them to us.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just a few issues that I wish to raise on behalf of the constituents of East Grand Bahama. First is the fire truck in Grand Bahama, and this was an issue that was raised by the member for Marco City, but it has particular concern for those residents in East. As my understanding is that there is a fire truck that is stationed at the airport, and where there is a fire, an emergency, because the fire trucks at the fire station are not operational, the fire truck from the airport will leave the airport and take care of the emergency situation. But if there is a fire out east, I think just last year there was a fire that was dangerously close to the High Rock Clinic. And we had called, now it will take a time for any truck, any fire truck, to get from Freeport to High Rock. And the concern is the airport fire truck, I don't believe can make that trip to High Rock and be back in sufficient time to be in the airport if there is a flight. And so that, I guess, is the immediate concern for residents who live in Freetown, residents who live in Bevanstown, High Rock, Pelican Point, Rocky Creek, McLeanstown. There's a very real concern, and we pray that there is no fire that takes place between now and when the equipment comes on stream. We saw that the present officer in charge said that funding was approved, and so we believe that the part is on its way, and we will also meet with the Commissioner of Police and raise the same concern with her as well. But residents are very concerned that if a fire breaks out in those east settlements, that there is no fire truck that will come to their aid. The second point, Madam Speaker, is, again, it was raised by the member from Marco City. We attended the Port Lucaya Marketplace and the concerns that was raised by a number of the straw vendors. They are in a desperate situation, and it was one of those situations where Miss Antoinette Smith, who I've known Antoinette for many years. She has been a straw vendor in Port Lucaya for many years, and she came out, I believe, not feeling her best. She came out, and she was not concerned about her own well-being, but she was concerned about the well-being of all of the straw vendors, and made a very, very heartfelt case on behalf of the straw vendors. And unfortunately, it may have been a day or 2 days later, she passed away. So we again raised those concerns on behalf of the straw vendors in Port Lucaya. They again have a very serious situation, and so we want to raise those concerns on behalf of those straw vendors. Again, with respect to the, as was raised by member for Kalani and member for Marco City, with respect to those bills, again, it was a very, very unfortunate situation because we did have some questions, and these were questions actually that were raised by some public servants as to what is the effect of the new bill on the permanent secretary. Now, we understand that the permanent secretary gets her authority from the Constitution, and we also understand that what you have raised is that it should mirror, or is supposed to mirror, what happens in tourism. And I tried to find the law that put in place the Director General in Tourism and how that works. Unfortunately, I was not able to find the law, but I found a quote on their website as to what is supposed to take place and how that structure is. It is slightly different from how your bill is worded. So that was a question that I wanted to raise in terms of how the permanent secretary is set out. And then you've removed a lot of the powers for the permanent secretary that was stated in the 2014 bill, where there was a hierarchy and the permanent secretary was given directives and so on, what they were supposed to take advice and so on. All of those have been taken away. And so what is the effect of taking those things away from the permanent secretary? And then the last point would have been the appeals tribunal. Your clause speaks to employees are able to use the appeals tribunal. Does this apply to a public service employee who was terminated? So if I was terminated and I make an issue with the committee, and the committee makes a decision, and then I go to the tribunal, does it actually apply to a former employee who has a complaint about termination? And if it does not, then I raise the question of you have a former judge, former Supreme Court judge, former Court of Appeal judge, and why would we need a former judge to look at questions of promotion and those other issues if it does not apply to former employees? So those would be some questions that we would have raised.
Chair recognizes the honourable member for Foxhill.
Is this clock stopping at 30 minutes? Because we seem to be allowing the debate to go on. The member for Foxhill has already contributed. I'd like to give my member statement before time is extinguished.
Chair recognizes the honourable member for Foxhill.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Let me address first the question of the straw market in Grand Bahama. The government is fully aware of the issues related to the straw market in Grand Bahama. I've had talks over the Christmas holidays of the same nature. What I had said to my colleagues there is one of the complaints is the beach access and where the bus drops off people and whether there can be some adjustment of the way the busing takes place and people who come into the operation. So I passed on those complaints, and I'm sure that the Minister of Tourism and the appropriate officials are having a look at it. Mrs. Moxie's office is in touch with them. What I was concerned about, though, when I went there is the complaint that they said that the aggressive nature of the people who own and operate Port Lucaya. And I was actually shocked at the condition of the place, that they've now got these lines saying, do not cross, because the railings are about to fall into the ocean. And the aides who were with me made a joke. They said, well, why don't they just fix them? Why are you putting a railing up there? And I say that in the context of when I was immigration minister, the people who are now the owners of the port came to us. And one of the approaches they made was they were going to be putting all kinds of investment in Port Lucaya, and this was going to be the next thing to slice bread. And there's no evidence that they've carried out their obligations. That's the problem. No investment in the place, and they have become rent collectors. That's what the straw vendor said. And there's no maintenance of the place, and it's just become, it's just extracting profits. And of course, this comes back to those who run the city and what their responsibility is to ensure that those things are corrected. As it relates to the matters about the appeal tribunal, let me just address generally, because I try not to be my own lawyer. There's a construct which is sent to the Law Reform Commission. And this is the design of the legislation which came back, which accomplishes the objectives which we set out. What I said in my presentation is, I want to introduce a greater sense of objectivity and transparency in all of these things, and to import into all of the applications of even the employment law, and I would imagine it also imagines former employees, the duty to act fairly. That's a principle in administrative law. And one of the complaints of all employees is that often actions which are taken by authorities, officials, is that there's a violation of the duty to act fairly, and they feel that they've been badly done by. So the idea was to put in place some mechanism to avoid those criticisms in the future.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
With the rules.
Yes, sir.
Move that with the consent of the House, a member statement be extended to the extent that I may address the issue of the fire engines. Sinance may make his member statement given what has happened.
Thank you, Honorable Member. And I call upon the House. Is everybody in agreement? Thank you, Honorable Member. Ma'am? It has been moved and seconded that the member's statement be extended beyond the 30-minute hour. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Member statement will now proceed beyond the 30-minute time span. The chair now recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama. And let's remember, this is member statement. Let's not turn it into a debate, but let's proceed forward. Thank you, Honorable Members.
Again, I accept your point that because I envisioned that that's what it was supposed to do too. But I wonder whether you may need to look at amending that, because it says an employee can make that application to add an employee or former employee to that to there, because again, it doesn't, if it's not an employee, you know, you are not able to apply. So that would be the only point we raise.
If someone becomes a former employee, in the sense that your contract comes to an end, and you expect in the normal course of things that it'll be renewed, that would be sufficient to ground you to go to the next level. But I'll refer the matter to the law reform people for their advice to see what we should do going forward. But my honorable friend reminded me that essentially it was meant, since you're no longer going to the Public Service Board of Appeal, that you now go to this Board of Appeal within the Foreign Service. That's what it's actually a replication of. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, just briefly, as this is member statement, but the issue has been raised specifically about fire deltas in Grand Bahama. When coming to office, we found that there was a deficiency of firefighting apparatus across the entire Commonwealth of the Bahamas, which is more than New Providence and Grand Bahama. The fire chief was asked to create a solution, and the solution for the entire Commonwealth of the Bahamas is different. There are some islands that can just deal with pumps, where everything is on the coast, and some that cannot. Particularly in Grand Bahama, the circumstances are that all of their fighting apparatus was under salt water in 2019. There's been a continuing expense to keep them in service, to the point that it becomes more and more expensive as the equipment breaks down. The previous Commissioner of Police had, after consultation, arranged to take a trip with the fire chief to a provider in the UK who was proposing to provide 15 firefighting apparatus for the Bahamas. The challenge is, Madam Speaker, that we've abandoned ground wells to serve as hydrants. because modern Delta's pumps are too high-strung to pump water from the ground and are limited to water provided by the Water and Sewage Corporation or potable water supplier. It is anticipated that, I think it's scheduled towards the end of this month, that they will be attending there to ensure that the equipment meets the specification of the Bahamas. Consideration will have to be given once that is done for short-term measures, either expensive repairs or cannibalization of one or more of the existing deltas to keep others operational. That is a matter that is being dealt with by the fire chief of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Sorry.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for St. Anne's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to extend condolences to two senior ladies that have passed in the St. Anne's constituency since we were last here. The first is the mother of Michael Wells, who is the writer, young gentleman that passed away last year. Also, his sister Cheryl Wells. Their mother, Shirley Francis, passed away recently. I got notice of it on Monday. She was in Canada at the time that she passed away. I'd also like to extend condolences to the Valukas family on the passing of Catherine Valukas, a matriarch in their family and resident of Culbert's Hill in Winton. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas has local government elections taking place tomorrow. An act was passed at the end of 2024 disqualifying police reserves from being nominated as candidates. So you ended up having in small communities such as Cat Island individuals that would step forward as police reserves and also as local government representatives, leaders in their community being prevented from sitting on local government because they had to make a decision, would they be on local government or would they be on police reserves to provide those necessary police services in these remote family islands. But what I found is that in some cases, individuals in constituencies have allegedly resigned as police reserves the day of the election. You also have situations where letters of complaint, letters of dispute have been sent to the Parliamentary Commissioner in North Andros because there are department heads who have been nominated and appear on the ballot papers. Madam Speaker, this is an ongoing issue. You have an issue also where writs of election, Madam Speaker, were issued, but there was no notice given to residents to change their address before the writs of election were issued. And now a number, Madam Speaker, are going to the polls tomorrow, not being sure if they'll be challenged because what's on their voter's card is slightly different from where they currently reside or where they've resided for over a year. So these are issues that we're still waiting to hear from the Parliamentary Commissioner on, Madam Speaker. And it's been a difficult time getting registers of voters from these constituencies because some were obtained before January 9th, and then there was a notice that the register was being cleaned up, and we've only gotten other registers recently. Now, Madam Speaker, we were expecting to debate the foreign bills, but I've seen this audit report from 2019 to 2022, and the public should know, my constituents know, that between 2022 and 2023, this government has spent over $400,000 just to provide vehicles to the Bahamas Embassy in Washington, D.C. alone. One is a BMW 740. Actually, there's 3 BMW 740s. There's a Honda Odyssey, Madam Speaker, and there's a Toyota Highlander. So while people are living in tough times, while we can't even get fire trucks on the island, it's been 3 years, we have over $300,000, U.S. price, $300,000 BMWs up in D.C. to be driving around VIPs, Madam Speaker, or as the Prime Minister calls them, the elites. Madam Speaker, I'd like to close by congratulating Dr. Raming on his birthday celebration today. I had the great honor of meeting Dr. Raming when he gave a presentation at the Bahamas Historical Society on the history of Fox Hill. He was there on that day with Mr. Johnson, who lives at the end of Step Street and Adderley Street in a beautifully constructed Bahamian-designed home with native stones on the front of it. I'll always have great respect for Dr. Raming and all that he's done and all that he continues to do as a great example of leadership in Fox Hill, Madam Speaker. And as I close on this issue of the Washington Embassy, Madam Speaker, this report identifies that there were 2 offices rented, costing over $100,000 or more per year. One office space, Unit 520, is, at the time of the report, determined to be vacant, Madam Speaker. Suite 520 is determined to be vacant. It's not known why the decision was made to leave it as vacant, but we're paying, Madam Speaker, over $670,000 for that unit alone. The public should know, is that unit still vacant or has that lease come to an end? While that unit remained vacant, Madam Speaker, another lease was taken on, and that lease was costing over $120,000 a year. Right now, over a 3-year period, it's cost the Bahamian taxpayers $375,000. We could be paying twice, Madam Speaker, for leases that are unoccupied, wasting the taxpayers' money. We also had a residence there that in 2018 got a budget for renovations, and then come 2023, the ambassador said it wasn't fit for the activities of a ambassador, yet it had been fit all those years prior and had been renovated on an approved budget. That residence at the time of this report remains vacant, Madam Speaker. It's going to be given some use, but that should be sold. It's estimated to have a value between $2 and $3 million. In the meantime, this administration took on to buying 3 million plus residents in a more prestigious area that obviously has the satisfaction. So we're sitting on an asset that apparently, based on this report, we have no evidence has been sold yet, and we're sitting on at least 1 vacant office premises that we're paying taxpayers' dollars on, Madam Speaker. This is what this administration is doing, and having fire trucks in the islands when the houses are burning is something they are not doing.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The chair recognizes.
Which passeth all understanding. Keep your heart and mind and the knowledge and love of God.
The chair recognizes the honourable. Allow me to. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Central and South, Eleuthera.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I won't go into all to rebut the member for St. Anne's because they did support the legislation, so he should have raised that during the debate. But I would wish all local government practitioners, the candidates who's running tomorrow, well wishes. We look forward to a heated election in some areas. So we look forward to this new council being the first council that would have the authority to raise revenue under the new act. So we're looking forward to that. Also, in reference to my constituency, the Office on the Go mobile office is moving throughout. This week we're in Hatchet Bay. January 27th to the 31st, we're in James Cistern. February 3rd to the 7th, we're in Governor's Harbor. February 10th to the 14th in Palmetto Point. And February 17th to the 21st, we're in Savannah Sound. And we'll continue to move throughout the constituency. And before I end, I would also like to announce that within the next 2 weeks, you'll see an expression of interest put out by the Ministry of Works and Family Affairs for persons or companies interested in constructing the glass window bridge in Eleuthera. Thank you.
Thank you, honourable member. Honourable member.
Thank you. I didn't bring up the issue with government in Hopetown. There is a constituent in Hopetown who successfully nominated. She's not withdrawn, but her name does not appear on the ballot paper. I was able to send a message to the Parliamentary Commissioner, but since the Minister for both Family Island Affairs and/or Minister of National Security with portfolio can just have that last matter looked into before the ballots go out tomorrow. There is a lady whose last name and first name has not been included on the register, and it should be, Madam Speaker. Her name is Gladys Marina Cash. And then finally, in conclusion, I'm wearing my nice red tie today, Madam Speaker. When I turn it over, it's from the line of Donald J. Trump. So I'm here on my feet now recognizing the 47th U.S. President of the United States of America and giving congratulations to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance on their election and inauguration yesterday, Madam Speaker. I know that most of the Bahamas must feel the same way I do, or at least the individuals that sent a team from ZNS to Washington, D.C., with reports being that it cost over $200,000 to send a bunch of individuals to do a Zoom call with Senator Waters, Congresswoman Waters. So to all of those that are in support of the Republican Party in the U.S., and like me, DJT, number 47, I extend congratulations to them all. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the honourable member.
1 minute first, man.
With regard to these what I call this slackness with throwing all these figures in the public domain.
Debate. We could have gone through them in detail.
And I'm just saying this, the government of the Bahamas is satisfied that all expenditure is appropriate and that there is value for money to the Bahamian public. That's all we need to do. That's all we need to do. And then lastly, one of the issues I started out with is that we ought to be careful as an administration not to interfere in the internal affairs of another country. It's inappropriate and improper.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Pinewood.
Regards to the ZNS travel, I have certain information. Once I get the full detail of the trip of ZNS to the coverage of the inauguration, I'll provide the same to this place.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, for the edification of St. Anne's and the public, the Parliamentary Commissioner independently conducts local government elections and general elections, because the member for Freetown, the member for Central and South Eleuthera cannot say that we do not have a horse in the race, and for the edification of St. Anne's and the public at large, the Parliamentary Commissioner has independent oversight of the elections tomorrow. I cannot give him any directions. The Minister for Local Government cannot give him any directions. Certainly, that's how we see it. We do not know how they saw it when they were in the chair.
Thank you, honourable member. And I think that now the chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
Madam Speaker, with your permission, I wish to extend an invitation to all of the residents of Fort Charlotte and friends of Fort Charlotte to join us on Saturday at Arawaki. We will be having a fun walk, run, and also a health fair where you can come and have your blood pressure taken, testing for diabetes, and Dr. Sherry Dorset store will be available with a team of nurses and other professionals, as well as therapists who will be available to the community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. That's it. That now concludes member statements. Back to the order of business. Appointment of select committees. Instructions to select committee. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings. Chair recognizes the honourable member for.
I renew all notices on behalf of the government, Madam.
Thank you. Honourable member for St. Anne's.
I renew all notices on behalf of the opposition, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honourable members. Adjournment.
Madam Speaker, I move that on its adjournment, the House to adjourn to Wednesday, the 29th of January at 10 a.m.
Thank you, honourable member. Is there a seconder? Thank you, honourable member. It has been moved and seconded that the House at its rising be adjourned to Wednesday, 29th of January, 2025 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Final adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I do move now that the House to adjourn to Wednesday, the 29th of January at 10 a.m.
Thank you, honorable members. Seconders? Thank you, honorable members. It's been moved and seconded that the House at its rising be adjourned to Wednesday, 29th of January, 2025 at 10 a.m.